Cabbage Garbage Garage. Yeah, so many years ago, I used to go to a lot of shows at this place called the Milestone in Charlotte, North Carolina. Didn't even care who was playing. You just kind of went on a Thursday, Friday, and or Saturday night. It's like $5 to get in. Didn't matter really who it was. And but the place, it was a dump. God, I think I'd been going there like 10 years almost before they even had a sign. Just kind of had to know where the place was. And eventually somebody spray painted on the outside of the building, Milestone. We're like, oh, look who's getting fancy. They've got a name of their business now on the side. But yeah, so the whole place too was trashed out. It was covered in graffiti when the old 1313 club burned down. It was a warehouse. They moved the speaker system into the Milestone. And it was crazy because you had this speaker system designed for, a warehouse, easily like 10 times the occupancy, if not 50. And also, it's packed into, a building that's maybe 980 square feet. And it was insane how loud it could get in there. But yeah, the place was covered in graffiti, and right below the soundboard, there was this little thing somebody had written. It said Cabbage Garbage Garage. I was like, that's pretty interesting. It's got I'm going to just change that pin out, man. It's going to be easier to change this pin than it is to keep pushing that cut deeper. Because I am really close to the next one. And that next one can't go even a hair. So I think we'll change out the fourth pin. Yeah, but it's an interesting little Cabbage Garbage Garage. It's got a phonetic roll to it. It's just very interesting. And I know I keep repeating that, but it's late at night, and that's what keeps popping in my head about it. And it turned out, though, who wrote that was a guy named Todd Colby. Todd Colby was the lead singer of Drunken Boat, which I was a huge fan of. But it did always stick with me. And I thought, when I started getting into doing these locks and making challenge locks, I thought, I want to make a challenge lock called Cabbage Garbage Garage. And I've done a lot of locks, and I've never pulled that name out because nothing ever felt like it was going to fit. Cabbage Garbage Garage. And I think this one's going to. I think this lock is going to be a surprisingly tough piece of crap. But yeah, you get these little. Yeah, that one fits downright perfect. You get these little lines stuck in your head, and they've got a use. Maybe they're just waiting. One of the last two songs on Spaceman 3 album, one was called Revolution and the other was called Suicide, and I hung on to that like in my head, Revolution and Suicide. It was a kind of really interesting ring to it. It's got a mystery kind of in there. And I sat on that, I did all this writing, and I sat on that, and just sat on that title for, decades. And then one day I was in Prague. I lived for about a year over in the Czech Republic. And I was in Prague, and we're in this girl's apartment. Everybody, we've been drinking all day, smoking all day. Everybody is just way far gone. I think Ministry was playing on the radio. I remember there were spaghetti noodles for some reason, like all over the floor. And at some point, somebody had moved one of the chairs out into the hallway or tried to stuff it in the elevator. And I say stuff it in the elevator because it's these really narrow elevators that they would put up in this communist block housing. You know, they're good for like 2 people. And Yitka came crawling across the floor, and she's sobbing and she's crying, and there's snot coming out of her nose, you know, and like drooling and everything. I mean, it's just leaking fluid, just total leak of fluids. And she starts going off about politics and the president, and how the president one day said, you know, he said, "Oh, I'm gonna ride every day on the bus if I get elected, you know, I'm not," and then, you know, next year he bought a car, and then he got a chauffeur, and, you know, and she was just going on and on about this, and she started screaming about, this is why we're doing this. This is why, you know, we're basically using, you know, drinking ourselves to death. It was like, it's our way of revolting. This is our revolution. And all of a sudden, that title, you know, I knew it. It was right. That was it. That was Revolution and Suicide, right? So, yeah, I wrote a novel. I sat down. I had been recording stuff happening there because I knew I was going to want to know about it later. I sat down and I wrote Revolution and Suicide. And then I went to go send it off to a publishing. I was finding an agent. I was going to send it off and get it published. And I went back and I reread it, and I thought, yeah, this is the first thing I've written, Revolution and Suicide. It was the first piece I'd written intending to publish. And I thought, you know what? I don't like it. I'd gotten good feedback on it. I'd gotten what I would consider honest feedback on it, and it was generally favorable. So it wasn't just friends saying, "Oh yeah, it's great." But I didn't like it when I read it, and I thought, I think it's because I wrote it for somebody or for an audience. So I highlighted 160 something pages, hit delete and save. And that was the end of Revolution and Suicide. It is still sitting on the hard drive, waiting for me to come back to it. And don't think I ever will. I don't know, maybe one day, long time from now. I still have all my notes. But, you know, these events, I'm so removed from them now. And, you know, it's hard to go back and write about something like that. And I find it hard to write about something when I know the end. And initially when I wrote it, it was troublesome because I thought, I don't know where this is going. Because it was, in some ways, even though I had returned from Prague, I was still in that space. And I was like, yeah, I don't have an end for it because the end's not written yet, right? And so I just kind of ended it. What I'm doing right now, I'm just trying to make sure this thing's going to be, it's got a couple sensitive areas in it. I'm just trying to make sure it's going to not snag. I think the cylinder or something's a little bit uneven. Got a little bit of lip on that guy right there. And of course, you know, you move the key up and down a little bit and you get that weird play. It's all about tolerances. But yeah, but I wrote it and I was just like, I'll end it with where I'm at. And that was okay, but and now going back, I don't know if I could stand to read it. Or rather, stand to write it, I guess, now. Still got to make 2 more pins for this guy, or just use 2 that are pre-made, and I haven't decided which I'm doing. It's hard to go back and realize sometimes who you were or things you were doing when you thought you were, yeah, I don't know. It'll probably remain unfinished. It'll sit in the R Decline archives. And that kind of helps too, right? If it just sits there, it can be a really great work in my head. Never has to go out and prove itself. I wanted to get the, normally I do the key last, but I wanted to go ahead and get the key cut up for this one, because for one, I thought I was going to screw it up. And this one was going to be a little extra sensitive. And it's going to look like hell. And if I can get this to work, it's going to pack one weird punch. I can tell you that. Lock Toss is looking really good, by the way, if you happen to still be listening. It looks about as good as it could look for being worked over by hand with inappropriate tools. Yeah, I don't know if anyone's... It's a weird video, isn't it? It's just kind of me sitting here chit-chatting while I finish up a challenge lock that you can't really see because I keep, every time I go to work on it, you know, obviously I'm right-handed, and I go to work and I turn the hand there right in front of it, and we're not close up enough to see anything. I don't like that pin anyway. Chuck that over here. Maybe I'll one day come back to it, right? Like Revolution and Suicide. I've got all these, I've got quite a few pins. I should include that I've turned and I just, for whatever reason, I haven't used them. Sometimes you just like shaping pins. I should use them in giveaway or something. Maybe somebody would want some pre-rolled pins. Or if this is Cabbage Garbage Garage, maybe it maybe I should use some of these garbage pins. Right now they're not garbage, there's some quite nice ones in here actually. Just for whatever reason I changed my mind. I don't know if you can hear the music. We've got Fear turning in the background there. Let's see if there's anything really interesting in here that we can drop down. Got some really long pins. I'm trying to work more and more. You know, normally you get these, the driver pins are all the standard size. And they're pretty tiny, you know. And it kind of limits what you could do with it because you're already losing, you know, about a quarter of it if you're doing it this way and chucking it. So one of these little pins, you know, combined with like just a, you know, zero, well not zero bitted, but you know, like just a very, very tiny depth. Like you just don't get to put a lot of cuts on the pin, you know, or if, you know, the thing's all the way deep, it's going to drop way down in there, and yeah, then it's not going to need much lift, and all that was probably backwards, but I think we're just going to cut a spool here, and I'm cutting it with just a bit of jewelry file. So I just put it in there, and I just kind of, if I'm cutting, I just start to turn it sideways, and I cut down long ways on the pin, and it makes one of those like kind of funneling tapering pins, and then I'm going to come in and I'm going to touch near the top, right? And I'm going to take it the other direction, but not as much. I want to cut in more. And I'm going to come part way up, the very tip top. I'm just very, very carefully, just minutely moving the jewelry saw back and forth. There we go, a little bit bigger. Yeah, there we go. And now I'm going to undo a lot of that work I just did, because I'm going to take the jewelry file and I'm just going to tip all of it down a little bit. Run some 1500 sandpaper around it. And that's going to give us a spool you can't really see. It's got all this light. It's got a couple tiny little serrations at the top, or rather the bottom is going to go in that way. So it'll be spooled, tapers up, and has a couple places it'll catch. And it's going to sit right there. We're at 16.5 minutes, and if anybody has watched this whole thing, I don't know what this was about. This was just some esoteric rambling about something. So you have a good night, because it's about 2 a.m. now.